The galaxy called it a Deathworld, but Earth didn't care. It spun on, indifferent, its swamps simmering and hurricanes howling, its creatures armed with teeth, venom, and the serene brutality of survivors. The Galactic Council had long ago buried its charts, whispering warnings of rogue gravity and poisonous air, of a planet where even the plants waged war. But the Florani Confederacy did not read warnings. They saw blue oceans and green forests, a paradise they thought soft and unclaimed. They arrived in pastel ships, trailing oils to soothe and pastel mists to pacify, believing conquest a kindness. They did not know about the hurricanes that gnawed coastlines like hungry gods, or the swamps where life thrived and rot. They did not know about the humans, not the sleek, starfaring kind from vids, but the ones who'd carved survival into their bones, who'd turned mud and rust into armor. The Florani brought hymns, Earth answered with fire ants and acid rain. The Confederacy's scouts marveled at the planet's beauty, its sunsets like open wounds. They did not notice the eyes watching from the mangroves, or the growl beneath the water, or the whispered punchlines of a joke they were about to become. Some worlds are conquered, others digest. The Florani learned this when their lavender skies turned to smoke, when their oils burned sweet and their ships sank into peat. They learned it when they met the thing that lurked in the dark, half metal, half madness, jaws wide enough to swallow hope. But first, they learned the oldest truth of Earth. Here, even the prey bites back. Chapter 1. The swamp breathed. Cletus McCoy felt it in the way the morning mist clung to his beard, thick as boiled collards, and in the gurgle of water moccasins sliding beneath his pirogue. The Everglades were never still, not really, not even in the false peace of dawn. He pulled forward, the rotting wood of his boat creaking like the spine of some ancient beast. Ahead, cypress knees rose from the tea-colored water, like the gnarled fingers of drowned giants. Some folks called the bayou haunted. Cletus reckoned they were half right. Ghosts here weren't the kind that moaned. They were the things you carried in, regrets sunk deep as limestone, memories that refused to stay buried. Old Sparky trailed the pirogue, his cybernetic tail cutting a silent V through the water. The Gator's scarred hide glinted where the Army's engineers had fused titanium plates to his spine, a relic of Project Ironjaw. A failed experiment, like most things cooked up by generals who'd never set boot in a swamp. Cletus's brother Jeb had begged him to greenlight the procedure. Gators ain't just survivors, Cleet, they're artists. Give 'em tools, they'll make war beautiful. Jeb's voice still rattled in his skull some nights, always fading into the scream of that IED outside Kandahar. The still waited in a clearing half a mile north, hidden behind a curtain of Spanish moss. Cletus's boots sank into the muck as he stepped ashore, the smell of fermenting peaches and burnt copper stinging his nostrils. The rig was a Frankenstein thing, rusted propane tanks, scavenged nanofilters from a Miami junkyard, and a car battery wired to a solar panel crusted with lizard dung. It hummed like a contented cat. He patted the rig's flank. Ain't pretty, but you get the job done, don't cha girl. Moonshining was a prayer, not a chore. Measure the mash, adjust the heat, taste the drip. The ritual kept his hands steady and his mind tethered. Doctors had called it maladaptive coping after the discharge. Cletus called it survival. He was mid-pour when the sky split. It began as a tremor in the birds, egrets exploding from the sawgrass in a panic of white wings. Then the cicadas fell silent. Cletus froze, the hair on his neck rising. Old Sparky surfaced beside the bank, nostrils flaring, his organic eye rolling wild while the bionic one whirred, adjusting its aperture. The air tasted wrong, not the wet rot of approaching storm, but something cloying, synthetic, like a candle shop run through a carburetor. They came on a beam of lilac light. The ship materialized above the cypress canopy, its hull the color of Easter eggshells, smooth and curved like the underbelly of a giant porcelain crab. Cletus crouched, fingers finding the grip of the .45 wedged in his overalls. 5 tours had taught him this. Nothing good ever fell from the sky. A hatch eye-rised open. Lavender mist billowed downward, carrying the scent of bergamot and honey. Figures emerged, tall, willowy, their skin shifting between mint and blush pink, as if reacting to the humidity. They floated to the ground, barefoot, their robes shimmering like oil on water. The leader tilted its head, eyes wide and pupilless, glowing faintly periwinkle. When it spoke, the voice was a wind chime melody, words forming directly in his mind. Do not fear. We are Florani. We come to liberate. The alien hesitated, as if tasting the word. Yes. Liberate your kind from struggle. Cletus spat into the mud. Liberate my ass. Y'all ain't the first to try. The Florani blinked, chromatophores rippling in confusion. One raised a delicate hand, releasing a cloud of golden particles. The scent hit Cletus first. Vanilla, lavender, a kindergarten teacher's perfume cabinet. His muscles slackened. For a heartbeat, the swamp's edges softened, the weight in his chest lifting. Then old Sparky lunged. The gator's roar shattered the false calm. The Florani scattered, their grace dissolving into panicked floats. Sparky's jaws snapped shut on empty air, but the message was clear. Cletus shook off the chemical haze, sweat dripping into his eyes. Gaslighters, damn gaslighters with better special effects. He fired 3 rounds into the ship's hull. The Florani warbled, clutching their ears at the noise. The bullets left no dents. Y'all picked the wrong backwater, Cletus growled, retreating toward the tree line. The .45 was useless, but the swamp wasn't. He'd seen the way their ship bobbed in the breeze, too light, no proper ballast, seen the golden oil dripping from their dispensers, pooling in the cattails, flammable. The Florani regrouped, their leader trilling a mournful note. Violence is unnecessary. We give tranquility. A methane bubble burst in the muck near Cletus's still. His lips peeled into a grin. Tranquility's overrated. He tossed a lit match into the oil-slicked. Chapter 2. The smoke from the burning still tasted like betrayal. Cletus crouched in the blackened reeds, the hem of his overalls smoldering, and watched the last of the lavender mist dissolve into the swamp's humid embrace. Old Sparky lay coiled beside him, the gator's bionic eye whirring as it tracked the retreating Florani ship. The aliens had fled north, their pastel hulls streaking the sky the color of a bruised plum, for now, but the air still reeked of their oils, cloying and floral, like a funeral parlor's idea of peace. He spat a glob of phlegm into the ash. Liberators. The word curdled in his mind. He'd heard it before, in Kandahar, from officers who thought handing out candy bars could stitch a village back together after a drone strike. Some things didn't translate across species. The walk back to his shack took hours, though time bled differently in the glades. Shadows stretched like taffy, and the cicada's scream returned, louder now, as if compensating for their earlier silence. Cletus's boots sank into peat that whispered with every step, the ground a living thing digesting centuries of rot. He paused at the carcass of a gutted airboat, half swallowed by strangler figs, a relic from the last time outsiders tried to tame the swamp. The fig roots had split the hull, tender as ribs. Nature always won, always. His shack stood on stilts, its plywood walls patched with license plates and Pentecostal hymnal pages. Inside, the floorboards groaned under the weight of ghosts. Jeb's old banjo leaned in the corner, strings rusted to silence. Cletus didn't touch it. Instead, he pulled a mason jar from under the sink, the shine inside glowing faintly neon, a batch brewed with bioluminescent algae he'd scraped off a meteorite crater last dry season. The first sip seared his throat, a familiar punishment. The second tasted like cowardice. You hid out here, the moonshine seemed to hiss. Let the world burn without you. He hurled the jar against the wall. Glass exploded, liquid fire dripping down a faded photo taped to the plywood. Jeb grinning in camo, old Sparky, then just a hatchling, perched on his shoulder like some mythic pirate's parrot. Cletus's breath hitched. That photo had survived IEDs, sandstorms, the slow rot of guilt. Now it drank the shine. Jeb's face blurring beneath the amber stain. A thump rattled the porch. Old Sparky waited outside, his tail thwacking the railing in a staccato rhythm. Demand or warning, it was hard to tell. The gator's organic eye fixed on Cletus, unblinking. You done wallowing, it seemed to say. Cletus snorted. Hell, even the reptiles are judging me now. But Sparky was right. The Florani would return. Prettier ships and prettier lies in tow. And the swamp, his swamp wouldn't fight alone. He found the first recruit, knee-deep in a canal off Alligator Alley, her machete glinting as she hacked at a knot of invasive Burmese pythons. Louisa lights out. Mendoza didn't look up when Cletus approached. The python in her grip thrashed, its scales the color of old motor oil, but her hand stayed steady. A single chop severed its head. Heard you got visitors, she said, tossing the carcass onto a pile of others. Her voice was gravel wrapped in barbed wire. 3 tours in the Marines, 2 dishonorable discharges, 1 ex-wife who'd taken everything but her nickname. She still wore the dog tags though. They glinted in the sweat pooling at her collarbone. Cletus leaned against a cypress, arms crossed. They're coming back, with friends. Louisa wiped her blade on her jeans. The fabric was stiff with dried blood. And you ain't just gonna shoot 'em. Bullets don't stick, but their tech's dainty. Can't handle. He gestured to the swamp, the humidity chewing at paint, the mold blooming like gangrene on every surface. Her laugh was a bark. So we give 'em a Florida welcome. She tossed him the machete. He caught it by the handle, the weight familiar. Jeb had carried one just like it. The Seminole elder found them, which was how it always went. They were rigging tripwires along the Tamiami Trail, bottles of Louisa's homemade napalm, vodka, styrofoam, and a prayer dangling from the mangroves. When the air changed, the mosquitoes ceased their whining. Even Sparky stilled, his nostrils flaring. A figure emerged from the sawgrass, barefoot, his skin the same weathered bronze as the cypress bark. He carried no weapons, unless you counted the silence around him, a thick, velvet hush that smothered the swamp's usual clamor. Cletus recognized him from the res gas station, where he'd once traded a jug of shine for a bag of fry bread. The man's name was unpronounceable to outsiders, so the locals called him Charlie. He preferred it that way. You're stirring up the Horned One's waters, Charlie said, his voice the rasp of palmetto fronds. He nodded to Sparky, whose tail twitched in recognition. The gator had been a gift once, before the Army's engineers turned him into a weapon. Cletus spat. Ain't my party. They started it. Charlie crouched, fingers brushing the oil-slicked mud where the Florani had stood. They're scared, lost. They're invaders, so were you. The elder's eyes gleamed, black as the water between stars. But scared things don't think. They just run. Louisa tensed, her hand drifting to her hip. Cletus shook his head. Charlie wasn't a threat, just a mirror. The elder stood, peeling a handful of moss from a tree. Their machines breathe through the skin, clog the pores, they suffocate. He crushed the moss, releasing a cloud of spores, like a fever dream. Louisa raised an eyebrow. You offering help or poetry? Same thing. Charlie pocketed the moss. But you'll need more than tricks. You'll need a story. The story began with a boy named Javier, who rigged drones out of coffee cans and hurricane debris. They found him in the trailer park near Homestead, the air buzzing with the shrieks of his machines. The kid couldn't have been older than 19, his face still soft with baby fat, but his eyes were old, the eyes of someone who'd crossed borders in the belly of a truck. Javier's drone swarmed Cletus the moment he stepped into the yard, their rotors kicking up a cyclone of sand and cigarette butts. Keen as usted, the boy demanded, a controller gripped in his scarred hands. Cletus held up a jar of shine. Guy who needs your birds. Javier's gaze flicked to Sparky, who'd begun gnawing on a discarded microwave. You the one they're talking about on the radio. The crazy VO who fought aliens. Crazy's a cheap word folks use when they're out of answers. Cletus unscrewed the jar, the tang of fermented peaches cutting through the drone exhaust. You in? The boy hesitated. On the trailer's roof, a drone dipped, a deliberate bow. Javier's shoulders slumped. My abuela, she's in Hialeah. If they come for her, they'll wish they hadn't. Luisa stepped forward, her machete slung over her shoulder. Javier stared at her, then at the shine, then at the gator currently belching smoke. Father, he muttered. Okay, but we're naming the first bomb after me. The Florani returned at dusk, their ships bleeding apricot light across the horizon. Cletus waited in the mangroves. The others fanned out around him. Javier's drones hovered like dragonflies, their bellies loaded with Charlie's spores. Luisa had buried herself in the muck, her machete sheathed in algae. Only her eyes gleamed above the water, a gator's gaze. Let them come, Cletus thought. Let them see what a real Deathworld breeds. The lead ship descended, its hull kissing the water with a sigh. The hatch opened, and General Lalara floated out, her robes now the gray-green of a healing bruise. Her voice chimed in his skull, softer this time. We do not wish to harm you. We offer understanding. Cletus stepped into the open, Sparky at his side. The gator's tail twitched, scattering bioluminescent algae into the water. It glowed, a trail of stars leading the Florani to shore. Funny, Cletus said, his voice raw. You keep talking about what you want to give, never what you're running from. Lalara's chromatophores rippled. Behind her, Florani soldiers clutched their oil dispensers like talismans. Our world dies, she finally pulsed. The core collapses. We sought sanctuary, but your chaos is holy, terrifying. The confession hung in the air, thick as the methane bubbling beneath their feet. Cletus felt the others tense. Luisa's breath held, Javier's finger hovering over the detonator. Charlie began to hum, a low resonant note that made the water tremble. Cletus met Lalara's gaze. You ain't the first to break things while begging for help. He raised his hand. The swamp erupted. Javier's drones dive-bombed, spore bombs bursting against the ship's hulls. Florani writhed as moss clogged their biotech pores, their pastel skin modeling. Luisa surged from the muck, machete flashing, but her strikes aimed at dispensers, not flesh. Oil slicked the water, and this time, Cletus didn't need a match. Sparky's tail sparked against a rock, igniting the fumes. Lalara screamed, a sound like shattering crystal. Her ship lurched, sputtering. Cletus lunged, not at her, but at the soldier beside her, a young Florani trembling as his dispenser overheated. He wrenched it away, hurling it into the flames. The explosion blew him backward. Water filled his mouth, his ears. For a moment, he was back in Kandahar. Sand choking his lungs, Jeb's voice screaming, fall back, fall back. A hand grabbed his collar. Lalara, she hauled him onto a hummock, her strength surprising. His vision cleared in time, to see Sparky clamp onto her ship's engine, titanium jaws shredding the core. The vessel died with a sigh. Around them, the battle stilled. Florani lay gasping, their elegance reduced to shuddering animal panic. Luisa stood knee-deep in oil-slick water, her machete dripping. Javi whooped as his drones herded the remaining ships into a pollen-heavy thicket. Charlie knelt beside a wounded Florani, pressing moss to its seeping pores. Lalara stared at Cletus, her mind voice frayed. Why? We would have killed you. He nodded to Sparky, gnawing contentedly on a piece of hull. Maybe. But we've all got someone worth fighting for, even if they're gone. The general followed his gaze to the photo peeking from his overalls. Jeb's smudged face, still stained with shine, her chromatophores softened to dawn pink. Your brother, she pulsed. Not a question. Cletus stood, water sluicing off him. Y'all can still surrender. Lalara touched his arm. Her skin felt like sun-warmed stone. We already have.
Chapter 3. The swamp's breath grew thin as they ascended,
the air leaching itself of humidity, of life, of the familiar stench of decay. Cletus clutched the edge of the Florani skiff, its pearlescent hull vibrating beneath his boots like the hum of a tuning fork. Behind him the Everglades sprawled, a quilt of shadows and sulphurous greens, while ahead, the Florani flagship loomed, a grotesque bloom of coral pink and baby blue against the bruised purple sky. It reminded him of a birthday cake left too long in the sun, its frosting melting into the clouds. Jeb would have laughed at that, he thought. His brother had always seen the absurd in the awful, even in Kandahar, when the sandstorms turned their rations to grit and the locals glared at them like intruders, which they were. Jeb had joked about opening a bed and breakfast there. Think of the reviews, Cleet. 5 stars for the bullet-hole decker. Now staring down an alien armada. Cletus wondered if absurdity was the only lens that made war bearable. The skiff shuddered. Louisa braced herself against a curved bulkhead, her machete strapped to her back like a crucifix. Javier crouched beside her, fingers dancing over a jury-rigged control panel he'd wired into the ship's systems, a tangle of swamp-foraged copper and Florani crystal. Charlie sat cross-legged at the bow, eyes closed, chanting something that made the Florani pilot flinch. The alien's skin had dulled to the gray of a week-old bruise, its oil dispenser clutched in a 3-fingered hand like a rosary. They're just as scared as we are, Cletus realized. The revelation tasted bitter. He'd spent years painting his enemies in monochrome, but war, it turned out, was a prism. ETA. Louisa barked, though the word felt redundant here, where time bent like light through a prism. Javier squinted at his tablet, its screen cracked from a Python strike days earlier. 10 minutes. Maybe. Their tech don't believe in clocks. Cletus glanced at old Sparky, tethered to the rear of the skiff with a chain of braided kelp, the Gator's bionic eye word, tracking bioluminescent plankton that speckled the high atmosphere. He'd risked everything bringing Sparky, but the beast was the only weapon they had that might crack the flagship's core, a brother's legacy, chewing through the dark. The skiff pierced the flagship's energy shield. The air turned syrupy, scented with honeysuckle and regret. Cletus's ears popped. For a heartbeat he was back in his shack, Jeb's banjo gathering dust, the silence so thick he could drown in it. Then the hull groaned, and the memory shattered. They docked in a chamber that felt less like a warship and more like a cathedral designed by a drunk architect. Arches curved in nonsensical directions, their surfaces pulsing with bioluminescent murals, Florani history, maybe. Or prayers. Lilara awaited them, her robes the color of dried blood, flanked by soldiers whose pastel skin had faded to hospital white. You should not have come, her voice chimed in his skull, mournful as a funeral bell. Cletus stepped forward, Sparky's chain taut in his grip. You should have stayed gone. The standoff hung suspended, fragile as a dewdrop. Then chaos, as always, chose violence. A Florani guard lunged, dispenser spraying amber mist. Louisa moved faster, her machete a silver blur as it severed the dispenser's hose. The alien stumbled back, keening, as the mist pooled at its feet, thick, cloying, flammable. Javier didn't hesitate. He sparked a modified taser against the hull, and the chamber erupted. Cletus dove, dragging Lilara behind a pulsing coral column as flames licked the walls. The heat was wrong, cold, chemical, a fire that cleansed instead of consumed. Sparky thrashed, his chain snapping as he barreled toward the ship's heart, instinct or programming driving him. The core, Javier shouted, already sprinting after the Gator, drones buzzing at his heels like angry hornets. They raced through corridors that defied physics, angles bending like wet cardboard, the air thickening with each step. Cletus's lungs burned. He thought of Jeb's last moments, the IED's bloom of heat, the way time had stretched and snapped. This is how it ends, he'd realized then, choking on someone else's desert, now in an alien labyrinth. The irony tasted like moonshine. The core chamber was a gut punch of light. The engine pulsed like a living heart, its surface etched with veins of gold and cerulean. Old Sparky circled it, jaws wide, hissing at the hum. Do it, Cletus growled. The gator struck. Titanium teeth met alien alloy in a shower of sparks. The engine screamed, a sound that bypassed the ears and vibrated straight into the marrow. Lalara collapsed, her mind voice a shriek. You doom us all. Cletus grabbed her arm, hauling her upright as the floor buckled. You doomed yourselves the minute you thought peace was something you could gift. The engine cracked. A fissure of light split the chamber, and the scent of Tabasco hit the air, sharp, acidic, human. Cletus froze. The hot sauce vial had broken in his pocket, its contents dripping into the Florani's pristine systems. Lalara gasped, her pupils dilated, swirling from periwinkle to crimson as capsaicin flooded the vents. To the Florani, it wasn't spice, it was revelation. She trembled, clawing at her throat, her chromatophores blazing like a sunset. What is this fire? She pulsed, awed. Surrender, Cletus said, simple as a shovel to the skull. The ship groaned, alarms warbled, discordant as a broken choir. Javier whooped as his drones herded disoriented Florani into escape pods. Luisa stood guard at the door, machete dripping with oil, her face a mask of grim triumph. Charlie knelt beside a fallen alien, pressing moss to its wounds, his chant weaving with the chaos. Lalara sagged against Cletus, her skin fever hot. We did not know. He gripped her shoulder, steadying them both as the flagship died around them. Now you do. Cletus and Lalara are in an escape pod, watching the flagship implode. Sparky snores at their feet, engine shrapnel glittering in his teeth. On the view screen, Earth fills the horizon, a mosaic of swamps and cities, terrible and beautiful. Lalara touches the Tabasco stain on her robe, her voice a whisper. We will tell stories of this fire. Outside, the first Florani pilgrims descend, drawn not by conquest, but by the promise of a warmth they've never known. Cletus leans back, eyes closed. Somewhere, deep in the swamp, he imagines Jeb's banjo finally playing in tune. Chapter 4. The swamp had learned to sing. Cletus heard it in the pre-dawn hours, when the last of the Florani pilgrims had retired to their bioluminescent tents, and the resort's neon signs flickered off one by one. The old rhythms of the Everglades, the gator bellows, the sawgrass rasp, now wove through alien hymns, their melodies like wind chimes caught in a hurricane. He stood on the boardwalk of Swamp Wars, the ride, its planks still damp from the evening's thunderstorm, and watched the first tendrils of mist rise from the water. They glowed faintly pink, a parting gift from Florani terraformers, who'd mistaken algae blooms for art. The resort sprawled around him, a patchwork of salvage and alien tech. Solar panels hummed alongside Florani light crystals on the rooftops. A Florani-engineered Ferris wheel, its gondolas shaped like giant magnolia blossoms, loomed over the parking lot where Luisa's ancient pickup rusted peacefully. The centerpiece was old Sparky's lagoon, where the gator dozed on a synthetic sandbar, his titanium plating polished to a dull shine by endless streams of pilgrims. They came to toss him Tabasco-infused marshmallows and whisper prayers to his twitching claws. Saint Sparky, patron of holy chaos. Cletus spat into the water. The title made his skin itch. He'd built the resort because Lalara asked him to, because Javier needed something to tinker with besides bombs, because Charlie said stories needed soil to grow. But some nights, when the Florani incense clogged his lungs, and the laughter of alien children echoed too much like Jeb's, he slipped into the deeper glades. Tonight was such a night. The path to Jeb's grave was overgrown now, strangled by Florani vines that pulsed soft tangerine in the dark. Cletus hacked at them with a machete, the blade still nicked from Luisa's python wars. The grave marker, a slab of limestone, etched with a banjo, leaned drunkenly, moss swallowing Jeb's name. But the sapling they'd planted during the surrender ceremony had thrived. It stood 12 feet tall, its branches heavy with hybrid fruit, peaches fused with Florani calora pods, their skins iridescent. Should have been you here, Cletus muttered, sinking onto a cypress knee. The tree rustled, a calora pod plopping into the muck. It burst, releasing spores that shimmered like fireflies. Jeb's laugh, maybe, or indigestion. Sparky emerged from the water, his bulk scattering the spores. He'd grown fat on marshmallows and admiration, but his eyes still held the feral gleam of something that remembered blood. He nudged Cletus's boot, a low rumble building in his throat. Yeah, I know, Cletus sighed, ain't the time for wallowin'. The message came as they pulled back to the resort. A Galactic Council dreadnought hung in the sky, its obsidian hull drinking the dawn light. It didn't land, didn't hail, just hovered, silent as a tumor. Lalara met him at the dock, her robes the crisp white of surrender flags. Her skin had deepened to a rich terracotta since adopting Earth's sunrises as her liturgy. They've come to judge us, she pulsed, her mind voice steady. Cletus eyed the dreadnought. Judgin's what folks do when they're too scared to learn. The council's envoy materialized at noon in the resort's trading post, between racks of taxidermied gators and Florani mood crystals. It was a machine, a sleek obsidian pillar with a single red eye. The air around it chilled, frosting the sweet tea jugs. Earth Cletus, you harbor fugitives. The voice was a glacier's creak. Cletus leaned on the counter, a toothpick rolling between his teeth. Harbor's a strong word. We're more of a bed and breakfast. The envoy's eye flared. The Florani Confederacy is a Category 3 deserter species. Their presence destabilizes. Save the sermon. Louisa stepped from the shadows, her machete replaced by a Florani pressure rifle slung carelessly over her shoulder. She'd taken to wearing her dog tags outside her shirt, the metal stamped with new Florani glyphs. Warrior teacher. We know your categories. Deathworld, savage, vermin. The envoy rotated toward her. You are irrelevant. Javier's laugh crackled from the rafters. He perched on a drone, his legs swinging, a soldering iron sparking in his hand. Says the toaster who can't even sweat. The trading post tensed. Florani pilgrims pressed against the walls, their oils souring with fear. Charlie entered last, his palms coated in Calora sap. He began humming, low and resonant, and the frost on the jugs melted. The envoy's eye dimmed. You have one solar cycle to relinquish the Florani. Cletus straightened, the toothpick snapped. Or what? You'll bomb us? Burn us? He gestured to the window, where Sparky's lagoon glittered with 100 alien offerings. We've already survived both. We ate both. Silence. The envoy pulsed, its algorithms parsing defiance. Then it vanished, leaving a puddle of ice, and the stench of ozone. Lalara exhaled. They will return. Cletus watched a Florani child offer Sparky a Tabasco popsicle. The gator accepted it delicately, like a communion wafer. Let him. They gathered at dusk, human, Florani and the swamp itself. Louisa strung pulse mines along the boardwalk. Javier reprogrammed the Ferris wheel to launch drones. Charlie buried Calora seeds in the muck, their roots tuned to strangle metal. Cletus stood apart, staring at the dreadnought. It blotted out the stars, a void where hope went to die. Lalara found him at the water's edge. She carried a sapling, its roots wrapped in burlap. From the tree she pulsed. For them. He took it. The sapling's leaves trembled, their edges serrated like banjo strings. You think it'll grow in space. All things grow where they're planted with defiance. The dreadnought's belly opened. 1,000 ships spilled out, sleek as scalpels. Here we go, Cletus muttered. But the attack never came. The Florani pilgrims stepped forward first. They raised their dispensers, not of oils, but of Earth's dirt, soil from the swamp, the deserts, the frozen tundras. They hurled it at the council ships, the granules fusing with hulls, clogging vents. Louisa whooped, launching pulse mines that detonated in silent blooms of electromagnetic confetti. Javier's drones swarmed, dropping water moccasins onto cockpit viewports. And Sparky, old fat Sparky, surged into the lagoon, his roar shaking the boardwalk. The water churned as Florani, terraforming algae, reacted to his biosignature, rising in a tidal wave of glowing green. It crashed over the lead ship, dissolving its shields in a sizzle of acid and defiance. The council retreated, not with a bang, but a system error. The resort burned brighter that night. Cletus found Lilara at Jeb's tree. They planted the sapling beside it, their hands overlapping in the dirt. Your brother's song is loud, she pulsed. He snorted. He'd be pissed we used a shovel, not explosives. They returned to the boardwalk, where Florani children raced Javier's drones, and Louisa arm wrestled a council defector, mechanical cheating. Charlie strummed Jeb's banjo, its strings tuned to a Florani hymn. Sparky dozed, a Calora pod half chewed in his jaws. Cletus sat beside him, the moon high, the swamp singing its hybrid song. Somewhere, the Galactic Council licked its wounds. Somewhere, new pilgrims charted courses toward the Deathworld. But here now, there was only the thrum of cicadas, the laughter of fools and saints, and the gentle snore of a gator who'd eaten a fleet. The swamp breathed, and it was enough. Epilogue: The Galactic Council Archives. Entry hash 45782. Omega, planet designation, Earth. Status: quarantined, voluntary. Note: survivors, saints, do not engage.